Hi, this is Michelle Watterson, the Karate Hottie, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Filthy Rich. You're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Will Brooks, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Victor Spot, Virgin.
I'm Lance Hardy Palmer.
I'm Caldipedia. You're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Ib, the E.T. Thing, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Yo, this is Dan, the Hangman Hooker, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Did you hear the one about me being a drum? Did you hear the one about me losing my nerve?
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to another edition of Stand and Bang Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Robbins, and with me, as always, is Mark Modeski. Mark?
How you doing, Aaron?
Not too bad. Look at this, full-blown Canadian again. We are in luck. We have a special guest co-host, Leslie Smith of UFC fame. Leslie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
And our guest tonight is Alan Jouban. Alan, you doing good?
I'm doing good, and thank you.
All right, fantastic. Before we get started, I want to let everybody know that we're over on LUB-MMA.com. Check out LUB-MMA.com for all of your updated news and entertainment shows. And we also have a new person on our banner, Jamie Skipper, over at Unique Kennels, the official bulldog of MMA. You may have seen him last night on Benson Henderson's shorts and Efrain Escudero's shorts. He is a breeder of bulldogs for over 30 years, so go check them out over at Unique Kennels and the number 71, or over on Facebook at Unique Kennels/Conway. And with that, if you guys are ready, just like always, we're going to go ahead and start with the news. Is that where you guys want to start tonight?
Yeah, let's do it.
Good.
Okay, well, unfortunately, the news is the same as it was last week. Missed weights and hot piss tests. And this is starting to become a very concerning problem. We talked last week about, obviously, Anderson Silva, and now it looks like there is rumors that there may have been a second, or actually a third substance, but a second missed test, that the results are still waiting to come out on that. And also in last night's event, which was UFC Broomfield, we had two guys miss weight, one egregiously, and one guy was able to go back and get the extra hour and actually make weight. But this is starting to become a ridiculously concerning problem. So why don't we go ahead and pass this over to Leslie. Leslie, what do you think about all of the PEDs that are starting to show up now?
I think it's really unfortunate. It's a bummer to see people. It's cheating, and it looks like cheating. It sounds like cheating, and the general public sees it. And I think that it makes them lose a little bit of respect for everybody who's participating in the sport, because when you know that it wasn't just hard work that went into everything, it kind of takes away from everything, I think. Okay, now, being that you're the female perspective on the show, what do you think is going to happen when the WMMA fighters start getting tested out of competition? Do you think it's going to be as rampant over there as it is with the men? I don't know. I mean, I have my own little list of people who I've always wondered if they were on PEDs or taking anything. But in general, I think that women frequently do a lot smaller weight cuts. Not very many women are doing the huge 30 and 40-pound weight cuts that I hear a lot of the men doing. And so the main PED that I'm hearing people getting in trouble for is, or use of the PED has been for weight cutting. So I think that as long as the women stay close to fighting in the right weight class for them, then we're not going to get as many problems with them showing up dirty. Okay, let's hope that's true. Now, Alan, I'm going to throw it over to you, being that you're participating in the sport. Is this a surprise to you, a disappointment, or is this kind of something you knew may have been going on?
Well, just to touch on what you just said with Leslie, I'm curious, Leslie, he mentioned something about once they start testing the women more. Are you guys getting tested before and after your fights as well, like the men? Oh, yeah. I got tested when I was fighting at Invicta. I've been tested since I've been fighting at the UFC, but I haven't had to take any out-of-competition tests yet. Gotcha. Okay, me neither. Same thing. I was just making sure, clarifying that we were kind of both men and women doing the same test. So I do the same thing. You know, we have to pee before and after the fights. I haven't had any out-of-competition testing yet. I think they're saving that mainly for, like, main event guys or people of suspect, But yeah, I know, I agree, man. It's unfortunate because I'm a clean fighter. I've been a clean fighter my entire life, and I know plenty of clean fighters. And I think it gives not only us but the entire sport in general a bad rap. And like Joe Rogan came out recently, quoted to say something I think along the lines of he thinks 50 to 60% of fighters are probably dirty. And Joe Rogan's a guy that I respect a lot. I think not only do a lot of fighters respect what he says, but the general public listens to what Joe Rogan says. He's the voice of MMA. Whatever Joe Rogan says, they believe. So if he's telling people that maybe 50 to 60% of fighters are dirty, it's pretty much saying that every other guy, every other woman is dirty, and it looks bad on me. It looks bad on other fighters who are clean as well. So it's a negative thing that I'm kind of hoping is going to go away. I think it's just going to take time as they start to get better with these tests and get more strict with the with not only the penalty but the guidelines of the test. I feel like right now these guys doing the testing and everything, they're making mistakes, and there's all kinds of, I guess maybe there's some money being slid under the table. I don't know, but there's a lot of mistakes seemingly happening right now. So I think it's just going to take time before we can clear it up.
Definitely. Now, Mark, you and I talked about a little bit ago about the post-fight presser. You weren't able to watch, but I caught a little bit of what Dana White had to say. Now, guys, on Wednesday, the Fertittas and Dana White are going to hold a press conference, and when he was asked about that, what's going to be presented in the press conference, he said it's going to be quote-unquote bad shit. So I imagine that there is some penalties coming down the pike here, or at least some proposed penalties. Mark, what do you propose? What do you think they're going to announce? What kind of penalties, what kind of action are they going to take?
Man, if Dana's saying that it's going to be bad shit coming down the pipe, quote unquote, I have to believe that this is going to sort of impact all levels of MMA fighters. I think you're probably going to see one or two, I'm thinking like A-list fighters, not just, obviously Anderson Silva, he's recently had that on his record, but who knows where Anderson's career stands right now. But I have a feeling we're going to see some big mainstream fighter, maybe. I don't want to throw names out. You know what? I'm not going to say anything right now because I don't want to get into innuendo or anything like that. But I have to assume that there's going to be, Dana's always been pretty big on standing by the suspensions, the penalties on the financial level. I got to assume that there's going to be some pretty big suspensions coming down the line for some big name fighters. Whether or not to, Alan's point, it's going to be, 50, 60% or whatever to Joe Rogan's stat. That sounds like a large stable of fighters I can't see, but I got to figure that either he's saying there's going to be, he's going to be handing out punishments, and I have a feeling there's going to be a second backup point to that, showing that there's going to be more harsh penalties coming up for banned substance being used and whatnot, because, again, Dana White, I have to give the guy credit in the fact that he always has had a pretty firm fist that he throws down whenever he finds out, for the most part, in terms of, banned substances and whatnot. So I think he's worked really hard to try and legitimize the sport. And, things like this, they really take away from that and the credibility of it. And, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the guy's bread and butter. He doesn't want to see it getting stained by things like this.
Okay, now I'm going to throw this over to Leslie. The day before that, there is going to be an NSAC hearing with Hector Lombard, Anderson Silva, and Nick Diaz. Leslie, in your opinion, being part of the sport and being that NSAC hearing is right before this press conference, do you believe that it's possible for these fighters to get an even play, or do you think that their popularity, where they stand in the sport, is actually going to make more of a difference on how much they get punished?
Well, I think it's a very interesting situation that they're in coming up with the punishments, because Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz, they're fighting from different sides of the fan appreciation spectrum, if that makes sense. So public opinion on the two fighters is very different. And not only that, penalties for Nick in the past have been more severe than penalties for other fighters. Like Jessica I showed up dirty, and I don't think she even got a suspension. They said stuff like, her fight got turned into a no contest. But it wasn't anywhere near the big deal that it was with other fighters, with Nick. So I think it'll be really interesting trying to figure out the right punishment for all these different substances and all these different fighters.
Okay, Alan, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you think it is possible during this that it's going to be fair play, let's say, across the board, even though Mark pointed out that Dana White does want to clean up the sport, and I legitimately believe that he does want to have a clean sport. I'm of the opinion that it's still going to matter where you're ranked and how much money you're bringing in, but I want to get a fighter's opinion on that. Do you think it's going to be straight across the board?
Yeah, I don't even know anymore, to be honest. You would think that, a rule is a rule, and once they enforce it, it's done. But I don't know. We've been seeing a lot of crazy stuff already at the beginning of this year. I'm curious to see how it goes this week, and what guidelines they set down and what restrictions they put on everybody and punishments and everything. So I don't know. I'm gonna kind of just listen and see what happens the next couple of weeks with all the fighters that have gotten in trouble lately, and make my decision from there, really.
I was gonna say, I think that we should just have two different divisions. We can have the guys on drugs fighting on one side, and then we can have the clean fighters fighting each other. And then that way people get to see these big, huge guys beating each other up, and then all the clean fighters can do their thing.
Kind of like substance-free bodybuilding as opposed to the roided-out bodybuilding. And I just want to point out, fans, the views of Leslie Smith do not represent the views of Stand and Bang podcast. No, I'm just teasing. Before we leave the PED subject, which seems to be a dead horse that we're beating even worse, real quick question for all three of you before we leave the PED subject. Is it going to get worse before it gets better?
It will definitely get worse. I mean, if we're going to start cracking down, then we're just going to see a bunch of guys popping up, and it's going to be like that for a while before it gets cleaned up. And I think it'll be kind of considered like the dark years, the dark ages of the UFC, of MMA for a while. We're going to look back in a couple of years once we do have this under control, and look back at it and kind of laugh because of all the craziness that was happening at the time.
Okay, Leslie, do you agree? Worse before it gets better?
Definitely probably going to get worse before it gets better. Like Alan was saying, that there's going to be a bunch of people showing up. Not only is there going to be a bunch of people showing up as people are getting in trouble, but it's mentalities that are going to have to change. Because lots of times when people are showing up dirty, they're not the only people from their team to show up dirty. They're not the only people from whatever group they're hanging out with that's been dirty. So what's going to have to happen is that entire circles of people who are working together are going to have to change the way that they're doing this whole training and getting ready for fights thing. And that's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay, definitely. Mark, you agree with that assessment? We're about to see some dark ages in the UFC?
Yeah, I mean, I got to believe so. I think we're moving into this era, and we've been actually seeing it for a lot of years now. It just hasn't taken on necessarily or manifested itself in the PED fashion that we've seen emerging more recently. But, fighters have been going in for a lot of years now, a lot bigger into their weight classes and doing these massive cuts. And so they can be competitive, because you get these big guys in there, like the Anthony Johnsons that we've talked about, who used to walk around at like 220 and then fight at 170. And guys couldn't be competitive at their own weight class anymore, so they had to look for an advantage. And I mean, that puts them, I start to see the sport moving into, and I hate to say it, into this like Lance Armstrong mentality, where it's like they don't see necessarily as cheating. It's just kind of remaining competitive with the rest of the field. I'm just trying to stay even with everybody else and keep my head above water. So I definitely think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with all of you. And Jim and Dan Miller kind of had a logical look at it last week, if anybody wants to take a look at that show. And that's where they brought up it's more or less just that competitive edge and wanting to be able to perform. Well, now that we're going to leave the PED subject, I want everybody to be aware that we have Alan Jouban, probably one of the prettiest guys fighting in the UFC right now. No, Alan, you know you're pretty.
Watch out, Alan. He's got your number.
I do have his number and his Skype, but this does not come from me. I am reading off of his Wikipedia. Jouban was a professional model and also appeared in several television commercials. The model website mostbeautifulman.com refers to Jouban as one of the foremost male models in Los Angeles, which brings us to weight cutting. That was a little segue, because we had some pretty bad weight cutting last night at the event. Patrick Walsh came in 191.5 and looked horrible. Chris Kalades, 127, and James Mutasri, 158. I believe Chris Kalades was able to go back and make weight. But I believe that the funniest part of the night last night is one of my tweets over on Twitter came up with the name Patrick Walsh when he saw Patrick coming to the cage. And so I want to ask Alan of High Cheekbones and Square Jaw, what do you think is going on with these guys? Why is this weight cutting thing such an issue?
Thank you for coming to me first, because my teammate and friend James was one of the guys who missed weight today. So on Friday. So yeah, it was unfortunate, man. I didn't see that. He's got a huge cut. That guy. Speaking for James specifically, he's got a huge cut. He's bigger than me in the off season, and I'm a welterweight. He's a lightweight. He cuts down from like in the 190s down to 155. So he has a crazy cut. He had his coach with him, Kenny Johnson, and I think Kenny Johnson lost 12 pounds himself in the steam room, in the sauna, trying to help James make weight, and he just couldn't do it. With that said, man, I don't want to see my buddies penalized, but in the sport in general, man, it's just a shame. I mean, it's unprofessional and it's disrespectful to your opponent. You know, like you're signing the contract to fight on this date for this amount of money and at this weight, and then you pretty much break the rules, you're pretty much breaking the contract. So it's disrespectful, man.
Anyway, so you were saying that it was one of your teammates. James actually is one of your teammates. I was not aware of that. And 190 to, where did you say he cuts to?
Yeah. He starts around like the low 190s to make 55, and he weighed in, I think, at 157. I think he was like a pound over the catch weight on Friday.
Okay, now he did look great in his fight, but that is insanity, and I think that's what we're seeing with these guys. I mean, that's monstrous. So if he started in the low 190s, came in 158 dehydrated, what do you think that he weighed fight night?
Yeah, no, he definitely puts on a solid 20 pounds. I don't know what he weighed in fight night, but he puts a lot back on. He's one of those guys that's kind of like a tweenie. You know, he's kind of in between weight classes. Maybe a little short, a little small for welterweight, but a huge lightweight. And it showed in his fight, man. He looked massive next to the guy. The guy he was fighting was a wrestler, and the guy didn't have a chance of taking him down. James, when he would put his weight in his hips and the guy against the cage, that guy couldn't take James down. But that's his specific story. As far as the weight cutting in general, though, yeah, man, it's an issue. It's disrespectful when you go in there and you make sure that you do, you suffer and make sure your weight's on point, and the other guy doesn't do it. It's disrespectful to you, disrespectful to your sport. I mean, you wouldn't show up at a huge job interview for the job of your life and then show up half an hour late, or you know what I'm saying? It's like doing the same thing. It's doing the same thing. So it's a bad thing that we need to fix.
Exactly. And we, Mark, we always go off the rails on the show, and we're about to right now because UFC's most beautiful man just called his teammate a tweenie, and his tweenie was fighting Cody Pfister. And I don't know, James the tweenie Mutsari against Cody Pfister. I have so many ways that I could make that into just a terrible segue into the show, but you're right. James looked absolutely huge. Now, the one that I want to talk about, and I want to get everybody's opinion of, was Patrick Walsh. Now, okay, James has an excuse. He walks around 190, but the night of the fight, he looked solid. Everybody agree with that? Muscle definition, he looked like
good.
An athlete.
Yeah, look good.
Pat Walsh looked like they grabbed him out of the crowd.
Fair assessment.
I mean, did everybody see that? I mean, it's one thing when you're trying to drop extra water weight. But Leslie, being over in the WMMA part of it, were you a little bit surprised to see a man come in with that much extra padding and just kind of try to fudge it in the sauna?
Yes, I definitely was. That's kind of a big deal to be in really good shape when you go into fight. You don't want to be carrying so many pounds of extra weight with you that is not going to be beneficial. Obviously, you don't want to be walking around at like a 3% body fat all the time, because your body just functions better when it has a little bit of padding. It has a little bit of protection. But, an extra 30, 40 pounds of not muscle, I don't see that ever helping someone coming into the cage with that.
No, absolutely. Mark, were you a little bit, I mean, I know that he was big on Tough 19, but were you a little bit surprised that with this much time, knowing that he was going to be a contracted UFC guy, that he didn't take steps to look a little bit more athletic last night?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, you know where I kind of stand on all of this already because, like you say, we've talked about it quite a bit. My whole thing is that, I mean, it's not healthy, honestly. I mean, to even try and do things like that, like, you can't possibly expect to come in and give peak performance. Like, and that's just it. Like, you know, and it's like you say, like, these guys knowing how much time they have to prepare in advance, to be in good shape, good standing, good form, and whatnot. You know, you think you'd kind of prepare yourself and your body, your regimen, your camp to accommodate for all this and account for all of it. But, you know, yeah, like, I was just sitting there. I was like, what's wrong with this guy, you know? That's kind of where I stand, eh?
I was just going to say that there are things that happen in a training camp that can affect things. Like, you know, maybe someone hurts their knee so they can't run anymore, or they mess up their back and so they can't do the kind of cardio. And so then they have to make a decision at the end of it. Am I going to go in? Am I going to keep doing this even though I'm not 100%, even though I can't go in there at the best? I mean, I don't know if this is what he was going through, but and then you have to make a decision.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to say that there was 1 or 10 too many 8-piece meals from Kentucky Fried Chicken over there. That didn't look like injury weight. That looked like the same weight that he was carrying in Tough 19. Now, before we go to our first break, Alan and then Leslie, I want you guys to chime in because you're our insiders. Alan, what do you think is a fair penalty for a guy missing so far like that?
I don't know, man. I think I'd have to break it down and give it some thought. And but to be honest, I think there should be kind of like a 1 strike, 2 strike kind of thing. Because to agree with Leslie a little bit, sometimes guys do have troubles during camp, and you go into a fight, or you had bad travels, or you got sick or something, and it's hard to make the weight. So I think you should give somebody at least 1 chance. You know, you miss the weight, fine them the normal 20% or whatever it is. But if they do it again, if you're a repeat offender, then there's got to be stricter penalties. Just, you know, you got to weed these guys out. You can't have guys coming in 2 or 3 times missing weight like that.
I totally agree with Alan on that about the multiple strikes, because some people are just doing it again and again, and that's not good at all. And there can be different kinds of penalties, like you're not allowed to fight in this weight class anymore. Or as far as money penalties go, I think that if fighters were getting paid more money in the first place, that it would be a lot easier to take everything more seriously. I don't know, this is speculation, but a lot of these problems with the weight cut, with PEDs, with getting in trouble, stuff like that, I think that sometimes these fighters, us fighters, we end up going into the cage and we're just doing it for bragging rights at a certain point, because at a certain point that turns into the most important thing. Is getting in there and winning. And so I think that if there was more money as a concern, more money on the table, that would make a big difference as far as people and their level of professionalism.
Okay, those are very good points. We're going to go ahead and take our first break here. You've been listening to Stand and Bang Radio. You can find Stand and Bang Radio on LUB-MMA.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and pretty much any place else you find sports podcasts.
Hi, I'm Andrea KCB Lee, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Max Leonard Holloway.
This is Charmaine Not So Sweet Tweet.
Hi, this is Kelly McGill, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Jansen Medeiros, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. In the last segment, we were talking more about PEDs, of course, because it's such a bad problem. Hilariously bad weight cuts. And now we're going to talk with Alan Jouban about his upcoming fight with Richie Walsh. Alan, we had Richie on the show. He seems like he's very excited to fight you because you guys are both going to bring it. Now, I kind of wanted to bring up your fight style. You and I have talked before, and there's always kind of in the quotation marks, you fight like Rocky. There's this this area of the fight where you're not doing so well, or it's kind of getting put to you, and then you come back. Now, I wanted to bring up this to Mark because I know Mark really loves this guy too. There's another kind of iconic hero of the 90s where this happened. and he just happens to rhyme with your last name, so I wanted to bring this up. Jean-Claude Van Damme always seemed to have to rise from adversity. So do you think there's any chance of changing your name to, Alan Van Damme Jouban?
I don't think there's any chance of changing the name. But, you mentioning those two guys, those are the two guys that I watched growing up. Bloodsport and Rocky were
Yes.
So, I mean, like, maybe, watching it on the big screen so many times, it kind of just got in my DNA and became my fighting style.
Would it help if they changed Ricky Walsh's name to Chong Li just for this one fight?
Right? Throw some dust in his eyes, some chalk in his eyes, or in mine, and fight him blindly.
Fight him by feel. That'd be great. Yeah. Now, Alan, you made your UFC debut in 2014 against Seth Baczynski, and you actually won by knockout and got Fight of the Night honors. And then in your next fight, and we've talked about this, you were over in Brazil. You fought Warley Alves and won the fight but didn't get the decision. Does that still sting a little bit? Is that something that you want to make up for at 184?
Yeah, I definitely want to make up for it. I don't think it's like I need to redeem. I don't feel the need to like redeem myself, I guess you would say. But, it stings a little bit. The ride home, the long flight home definitely stung. I was banged up and I didn't get my win purse. And Joe Silva said I was inches away from getting a Fight of the Night bonus, but we didn't get that either. So, it made a big difference in the amount of money that I came home with. And so that hurt the most. And then, I had that loss on my record when I feel like, when you fight somebody, even when you spar somebody, you kind of know who won. And I feel like he knows that I won that fight. But it's not something I dwell on. You can't dwell on stuff like that. So I moved on. I'm ready for my next fight. That's all I'm looking forward to. But, I came in the UFC with a big debut. Couldn't have gone any better. Had a tough, controversial loss in Brazil against a Brazilian, and now I get a chance to come back and show the fans what kind of fighter I am. Fighting Richard Walsh, he had the same thing. He went to Japan and had a controversial loss against a Japanese fighter. So, like you said, I think he's kind of eager to fight me, and I'm eager to fight him, man. And to throw us on a pay-per-view card, on the main card, I think it's gonna be some fireworks, man. I'm excited about this fight.
Okay, Mark, do you have any questions for Alan on the fight?
Well, I guess, Alan, where do you think in this upcoming fight, what do you think is going to be sort of your biggest hurdle overall that you need to sort of get over with him or in order to sort of get that W on your record?
Yeah, well, I think, I look at Richard, and he's a tough guy, man. He's a tough, strong guy, and he has pretty good endurance, pretty good physically strong. And he's probably going to try to put me against the cage. I imagine he'll try to strike with me a little bit when he gets his opening. So try to put me on the cage and grind it out. So once I establish that he's not able to take me down and get off the cage and slow the fight down a little bit, I think I'll find my openings and I'll be able to end the fight early. I'm definitely looking to end the fight though. That's not it's not like I'm going to go and do something crazy in this fight. But if we find ourselves in a third round, you're going to see me going nuts on this guy because I'm going to be trying to end the fight. 100%. I don't want judges involved in this fight.
Okay, Leslie, you got anything before we move on?
I'm excited for your fight, Alan. You have a bunch of KOs on your record.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always exciting to watch. Don't you have one that was like 16 seconds too?
Yeah. Majority of my fights have been by knockout, and then pro debut was a 15-second knockout, so couldn't have gone any better. But with that said, I didn't get enough ring experience until I found until I experienced my first loss. As like the fights last night with, I forget the name, Brandon Thatch in there. Brandon Thatch is a beast, and he's going to continue to be a beast. But look at it. Last night, he had like 11 first-round finishes, and now he found himself in a 5-round fight. You kind of saw the experience take over with Henderson. So, yeah, I had a couple early stoppages in the beginning of my career, and then I was fortunate enough to experience a loss early in my career and learn from that. And then I also had a 5-round title fight in a smaller organization, which gave me a ton of ring time. So now that I'm in the UFC and I've had a loss and I've experienced 5 rounds of fighting, I feel like I'm ready to take on the higher level caliber fighters.
Okay, before we start looking at the fights that are coming up and the ones that have passed last night, why don't we go ahead and give the fans a little idea of why you are such a banger. You have a solid Muay Thai background, is that correct?
Yeah, Muay Thai is what I started in, man. I started doing Muay Thai. I was undefeated in amateur Muay Thai for a couple of years doing that, and when I was trying to pursue that, and then I started doing the MMA, and been training with great Muay Thai guys my whole life. Chris Riley was the guy who started me, and now I found myself over at Saxon's Muay Thai here in the Valley, here in LA. A guy named Julio Trana, who's just a great coach. He's the kind of guy that his name isn't out there just yet, but he's bringing up so many up-and-coming guys in the amateurs, and he's at the fights every single weekend, and he puts so much time and work. And he's the kind of guy that I love having this. I love having coaches that, like, when you're watching a fight and you see something cool, and then you text him right away, yo, did you see that? And he's like, yeah, we got to work on that in the gym. Or, like, you know what I mean? You're on the same page as far as whatever it may be, striking or grappling. And we're kind of like that. We're texting back and forth constantly and always trying to, just add something in there. So, my striking, I always thought that my striking was my best asset as a fighter, but now I've kind of taken it to the next level, I believe, with training over at Saxon's.
Okay, what would Lyoto Machida think about your grappling?
What would he think about my grappling?
Yeah, I saw a picture over on your Facebook where it looked like I don't know, he shit whipped you is what it looks like.
Shit whipped me. That's a polite way to say it, I guess. Yeah, no, we, lately, what had happened was...
What had happened was...
That's the beginning of an excuse.
Yeah, no kidding.
But what really had happened was, Anderson Silva had his fight coming up. Obviously, it was like 2 weeks ago or something. So when he had his fight, he took most of my sparring partners. Anderson took all my teammates, one of them being James Muntasiri, and a couple of the other bigger guys over at Black House where I trained. So the only bigger guys left were me and Machida. And the rest of the guys there, it was like Team Alpha Male. It was nothing but 25ers, 35ers, a couple 45ers, and then me and Machida. So it's a good thing and a bad thing. I was forced to go with Machida every day in training no matter what we did. And obviously it got me better because I'm going with a world-class athlete. And at the same time, I took my lumps. I took my lumps every day. And as you saw in one of the pictures, even though Machida's not known as a wrestler, yeah, he slammed me on my ass one time, man. He does have like a sumo background or something like that. I think he did some sumo wrestling at a young age or something. So he's got a real solid...
So, Alan, Machida's known also as a pee drinker that I've heard and I've read. Is this something that you kind of took on when you were training with him, too? Something you thought might help to improve your camp?
That's the old Machida. The old Machida had kind of a snaggletooth, kind of hairy eyebrows, drink a lot of pee. Now he's like the good-looking Machida 2000. Machida fixed his teeth, plucked his eyebrows, got a new haircut, lost some weight, went down a weight division, doesn't drink pee anymore, and is a much more handsome individual.
Sounds like he's working out of the Alan Jouban camp.
Yeah, I taught him some.
Yeah, he took a feather out of your cap, got rid of the monobrow, stopped urine drinking, and now we have Machida 2.0, which honestly I'm much more comfortable with that version of Lyoto Machida. That picture can never leave the internet with him in that cup. That is thanks, Mark. Thanks for keeping it classy.
I do what I can.
Okay, so while we are on the subject of all of the crazy stuff that Alan Jouban can do, why don't you go into your past a little bit? You actually were a professional model. How long did you do that?
Man, I still do some, but I started doing that. I guess I was like 20 years old, man. It was just something that obviously kind of like just grabbed me by surprise. Like I lived in Louisiana, grew up in Louisiana, and I got, as weird as it sounds, I got kind of like spotted in a mall by some small agency, and they said, we want you to go to this expo. And so I was like, why not? I went to this expo in Dallas, and then next thing I know, they gave me like I guess you can call it like a scholarship, a full ride scholarship to go to New York and start modeling. So I was just kind of like, in a small town in Louisiana, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my future. And although I grew up kind of like hunting and fishing, and modeling was the last thing that I thought I would be doing, it was just like, try to be open-minded and experience, travel the world, experience new things. It's like, how could you pass it up? So I went and did it. Like I said, I was like 20 years old, I think. And then after traveling around, it landed me here in LA. And that's when I started training martial arts about 10 years ago. And so it just, as the martial arts, as the fighting progressed and became more and more as like almost a job, which it is now, I just kind of put the modeling a little more on the back burner. And but modeling paid the bills for a long, long time. And I still do work now and then. But it was just, like I said, it was something that it came along. Sometimes, you know, opportunities come along in life, and you just don't want to pass them up, you know. And so I jumped on it, and I'm glad that I did.
And so is that how we ended up with Machida 2.0? Did you teach him how to do threading and told him maybe he should do a little braces work and get rid of that snagglepuss?
You say threading? Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Don't pretend you don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is. I honestly I want to know what it is.
Well, yeah, that's because you have a monobrow. Alan, do you know what threading is?
You mean threading the eyebrows?
Yeah, see, I knew you knew what I meant.
I want esthetician. Come on,
Sure.
I promise. Leslie, what were you saying? You were about to say something?
I was curious. I had a question for Alan. If you feel like you're being in front of cameras, like, do you feel like your modeling experience makes it a little bit smoother for you to be in front of all the cameras and talk to people?
No, absolutely. That's a great point, because honestly, I was horrible at it. I never, I don't know, kids these days, I feel like they have some form of public speaking or something that they do in school. When I went to school, like, my high school was it was not the greatest school at the time. We were kind of overrunning that school, and we didn't, you know, we just cut class a lot and did a lot of bad things. I was a real bad kid growing up, and I feel like I never had any type of public speaking, or I never did anything like that. That was one of my worst fears, was public speaking and being in front of cameras. And like, you look at all my kid photos, I even have them hanging on the wall. We laugh at them. I'm never smiling in one photo. I have this ugly frown on my face. I look like a real unhappy kid. So the modeling actually really helped with that. You know, being in front of cameras, and even, like, you know, you go on auditions and you have to do a slate, just saying your name and where you're from. Just doing that on a day-to-day basis kind of helped break me out of the mold and realize that I don't have to be, you know, kind of like a negative or, like, you know, mad or whatever. So it helped a lot, and it helps, you know, even interviews like this help you every time you do it. You get a little bit better at it. And it's the same with that, you know, doing all those shoots and stuff for so long. It helped me at this stage in my career. So you know, you can be a good fighter, but you have to be marketable and know how to speak and be on time and poignant and all those things. So it helped me a lot.
You said that you still work in modeling in some ways. Now, you know that I talk with AJ quite a bit. Now, AJ is your manager?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I know over at Epoch Agency, he's kind of talking to me about this kind of multi-level thing, and it's a new innovative idea. And you said that modeling paid the bills for years, and Leslie before brought up that sometimes you get into the ring more or less just to prove something because the money isn't there. Can you touch on what's going on over there and AJ's ideas for kind of like this multi-level idea to get fighters out in there in different industries to put money in their pocket and actually make these guys more in the forefront?
Right. Well, I mean, for what we're doing, you know, probably pertains more to a modeling aspect. So, I mean, obviously it's not for everyone, but you can just take that and run with it in other places. And, you know, you see, I mean, it's been the theme for years now, where, you know, trying to make more money outside of the cage and inside of the cage. And that's basically what we're doing, but you just get to another level where you see guys like, and I'm not comparing myself, but I'm just saying, you see guys, for example, like David Beckham, Cristiano Ronaldo, these guys that are good at their sport, but they're also very marketable as well. And they're going out there, and they're not just getting Dynamic Fastener as their, who I love. Thank you, Dynamic Fastener, for all your sponsorship. But I'm saying they're getting these huge campaigns from, like, you know, clothing brands like Calvin Klein or fragrances like Gucci, you know, fragrance campaigns, cologne, where they're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to break into that market where it's not just sponsorship, but it's a huge type campaign and it's not just for the MMA crowd as well, but you want to be kind of a global brand like these other guys are. So he signed a deal with Soul Model Management. Soul Artist Management. Soul is the name of the agency out in New York, and they represent a lot of the top models, a lot of guys that you might have seen on different campaigns and ads, you know, Tyson Beckford, I believe, and guys like that. And he was able to sign a deal with Epoch, my management, and them with Soul Artists, and they signed me. So, you know, we're hoping to carry along those ways, but, you know, nothing is guaranteed, obviously, and nothing happens if you're not good at what you do. So, you know, obviously I have to get the win February 28th and continue winning. And I feel like, as long as I do the right thing in the cage, I think everything else will follow outside of the cage. So that's what we're shooting.
Absolutely. So, Mark, I want to ask you, do you think that being in the clinch with Alan would be a little bit different if he were wearing, say, Gucci Guilty Black or something like that? Do you think that we'd see a little more friendly fighters?
Well, I just actually wanted to say thank you to Alan for making me feel like a goblin and that I should go live under a bridge. Because he's talking about all these pretty guys. It's like, yeah, okay, so I'm ugly. I get that now. I got a quick question I do want to ask you, Alan. Does this sort of factor into you improving your head movement and stuff like that because you don't want your face getting fucked up in a fight?
I used to think about that when I was fighting for free. When modeling paid the bills and I would go and fight, I would try not to get damaged too much. Now I don't really think about it because it's a full-time job. If it happens, it happens. And to be honest, I've done so many shoots and jobs with black eyes and stitches. And I mean, really, these days, if you have stitches in your hair or a black eye, they put makeup on it. As long as you don't have any serious swelling, they can fix it up. So it's not something I think about at all. Yeah, not at all anymore. And to touch on what you said earlier, Aaron, about being in the clinch with me, smelling good. Leslie probably knows about this. When you have somebody that stinks and you have to grapple around with them for an hour and a half, it is horrible, man. I appreciate clean people, or people that wash their laundry the right way. It makes a big deal, man, when you're training with people twice a day, man. People that wash their clothes, too much clothes in one load, and they come in there and their clothes still smells like it did last week. That shit's horrible, man.
Okay, so I'm gonna pitch an idea then for a great commercial. Alan Jouban doing some grappling with whoever fighter he wants to, then kind of goes off camera for a minute, grabs a little cologne bottle, goes over there and covertly spritzes his opponent, gives a big smile and a thumbs up. When you're wrestling with Alan Jouban, try not to smell like shit. Try Gucci.
Yeah. You know what, though? Actually, I appreciate you bringing that up, Alan, because it sounds stupid, but, you kind of sometimes you think about that stuff when you're watching a fight. I know Aaron's trying to be a smart aleck bastard by saying it, but I think there's a little bit of actual interest in that fact. Do guys actually kind of is the stink factor really come into play a little bit when you're in there? Is that like a psychological thing?
Not in the cage, but in training it definitely does. I think all gyms probably have one guy that most people know has a little bit of an odor or something. So
the stinky guy.
I second that.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you guys want to go on record to tell us who the stinky guy is at the gym?
No, I would never say.
You'll find out.
Yeah, or he probably knows it himself. I don't know.
All you got to do is come on the mat, and you'll figure it out yourself real quick.
Yeah, you figure it out real fast. All right, we're going to let Alan off the hook. Alan, thank you so much for being a good sport about all of that. We're going to go to our quick second break, and then we'll talk fights for the rest of the time, if that's all right with you guys.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have been listening to Stand and Bang Radio. You can find us on LUB-MMA.com, iTunes, Stitcher, and pretty much any place else you can find high-quality sports podcasts. Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. We're here with Mark Modeski, Leslie Smith, and Alan Jouban, and we're about to talk fights. Everybody ready for that?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, so last night we saw Fight Night Henderson versus Thatch, which was a strange fight. I didn't realize how large Brandon Thatch was, until I saw him at the weigh-ins. And, of course, Benson Henderson was looking at him, and then Joe Silva was looking way up at him. Did anybody else know that he was so large compared to Benson before the fight?
I didn't actually see the weigh-ins. I was watching the fight, and while I was watching the fight, I was thinking, oh my gosh, Thatch is huge compared to Henderson. And then I heard the commentary. They were talking about how the difference between their sizes didn't look as significant in the fight as compared to the weigh-in. And so I can only imagine how big he must have looked compared to him in the weigh-in.
No doubt. Alan, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say, yeah, I remember when they said that on the commentary that it didn't seem as significant, but they looked pretty big to me. And I remember Dana said it was hard to see on TV, but in person it was a lot bigger. But I was going to add to that, yeah, me and Thatch have kind of been on the same course in our career. He's been a couple fights ahead of me as far as, like, we've fought a couple mutual opponents. He's got to the UFC a couple fights ahead of me. We never fought, but I remember always watching his fights. And we fought different guys. And when he would fight a guy who I had fought as well, I remember noticing how big Brandon Thatch was compared to that opponent. So yeah, he's always been known as a big welterweight. You know what I mean? Not only is he 6'2" and very muscular, but he's got very long limbs, long legs, long arms, and so it helps to his reach a lot.
Yeah, he is a big guy. So we're going to talk about the last 4 fights, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at some Bigfoot versus Mir. But I cannot let this go by. Last night there was a catchweight fight at 191.5 pounds between Dan Kelly and Patrick Walsh. And I cannot tell you guys the last time I saw a fight that was so concerning to me. This really did, and no offense to Dan Kelly because I know he tried hard. But this fight was atrocious. If any casual fan would have tuned in during this part of the card, I can't imagine that they would have made it through the 15 minutes. Mark, can you remember a more awkward and just difficult fight to watch in recent history?
Yeah, I mean, you sum it up pretty good there, and I don't really even know how much I have to add. I mean, I was almost frustrated watching this. As an MMA fan, I get really frustrated when I see things like that. And I mean, I want to, you go out there and you know these guys you assume they're going out there giving it their best. And I'm not going to make any false assumptions or anything like that. But this was a bathroom fight for me when I started watching. I was just like, I'm going to go weave a basket for a bit and see what happens.
Exactly. And now, Alan, I want to bring this up to you because you're a Muay Thai striker, and that is very structured. Very straight line, very hard, 8 points of contact. Muay Thai fighters are known for their economy of motion. And then on the other side of the coin, you have Patrick Walsh. I have never seen a individual throw every single punch from either left or right field and then immediately bend completely over at the waist and to his right. Was that amazing to you that this guy was in the cage doing this?
That's about right. If I remember right, were they both southpaws? Were they both? I think they were both left-handed, and I don't know if that had something to do with it. They were kind of like, I can't remember correctly if they were, but I agree, man. The fight was such a snooze fest. The entire card, I don't know if it's because I'm getting close to my fight or because I knew a couple people on the card and I had a lot of interest in it, but I mean, my heart was pounding on my chest this whole card. I was super nervous. I felt like I was there about the fight, and then this fight comes on. And I was on Instagram the entire time. I mean, it was such a horrible fight, man. It really was. It's a shame.
Yeah, Leslie, what did you think?
I was thinking there's so many people on Fight Pass who are watching that who are like, oh, my God, I should be on the main card. Exactly. Why are these guys here? And I'm not.
Yeah, I got to agree with you 100%. I could not believe that was on the main card on Fox Sports 1. And like I said, no offense to Dan Kelly. I know he had a knee brace on. And I'm sure when you see the incredibly, like Tim Elliott, we can all agree Tim Elliott is awkward, but he's effectively awkward. Patrick Walsh, I don't even know what to say. That was just the worst striking ever. I'm okay. I got to move on before I get pissed off. That brings us to the welterweight fight, Neil Magny versus Kiichi Kunamoto. Alan, what did you think about this one? I was extremely excited to see Magny perform so well.
Yeah, I was excited for this fight too. Kunamoto, or however you say his name, he just came off of a close split decision win over my next opponent, Richard Walsh. So I was curious to see how he would perform against Neil Magny. Neil Magny, obviously now with the win, has the longest winning streak in the welterweight division. With that said, Neil Magny, I like him as a fighter. I think he's a positive guy. He does all the right stuff. He moves well. I don't think he's fighting killers though. So it helps. It's not his fault. He's taking whoever they give him. But I think he's fighting a lot of mid-level. All UFC guys are good, but he's fighting a lot of mid-level guys in the welterweight division, and that's how he racked up the win streak. So I would like to see him fight like they said, they asked him if he's ready for like a top 15 opponent or something, and he kind of replied, whoever the UFC gives me. I'd like to see him though against somebody a step up. to where we can really see what he's got going on. And like I said, I don't say that in a negative way. I think he's a really good fighter. He's doing all the right stuff to win. The guy that he fought, though, the Japanese guy, I had watched him fight Richard Walsh. And Richard Walsh, who my next opponent is, he's not really known as, like, a high-level striker. He can put your lights out if you let him, but that's not his go-to. But against the Japanese fighter, what's his name, Kunamoto?
Yep, Kichi Kunamoto.
Kunamoto that fought Neil Magny, my opponent, Richard Walsh, was able to do whatever he wanted offensively with striking. So I knew that Neil Magny was going to have a field day with this Japanese fighter because he didn't have much offense. His only hope was really to get it to the ground. But Neil Magny, being such a tall, rangy fighter with really good footwork, it was going to be a long night in there for him to get the fight to the ground and get on top position. And just the opposite happened. Neil Magny was able to take his back, I think, and what did he get him with an RNC or something at the end?
Yep, rear naked choke, and he got performance of the night.
Oh, he did. Congrats to him, man.
Sure did. Yep, a little bit of cabbage in the pocket. Leslie, were you able to catch this one?
I was. I thought it was a great fight. Magny looked awesome. It's interesting to hear what Alan was saying, though, about how the caliber of opponents that he's fighting. Obviously, anyone in the UFC is really high caliber, but it's interesting to see how some people can just really get those bonuses and those winning streaks going by not fighting the people who are at the very highest level.
Right. Hey, you make, like she's saying, sometimes you could get a good winning streak going and make good money doing that, rather than risking a possible, top 10 opponent in a loss. Not saying that he's doing that, but,
No, absolutely. But it can be advantageous to pad the record for as long as you can. Like you said, maybe in the shallow end of the pool. Mark, you get the last word on this one.
Yeah, I think it to kind of bring everything together that both Leslie and Alan said, I think it'll be a good step up for him to this was a good stepping stone fight for him. I think it's basically, he had a good performance of the night. It's shown that he can kind of beat those sort of low entry guys. It's like, all right, let's throw this guy somebody a little bit better, see if he can step in the ring with the big boys and potentially be a contender within the division. So it's a good stepping stone fight for him, and I think it'll move him up to the next level.
Yep, I agree. And now talking about moving up to the next level, this is what I believe happened with Max Holloway. He defeated Cole Miller by unanimous decision. During the fight, there was a little bit of controversy, which I don't agree with. Cole Miller was bitching a lot about 2 headbutts, and if you slow down the fights, which they always do in the first headbutt, he actually pulled Max into his face. There was no question on that one. And then in the second headbutt, Max was performing a flying knee, and his head was just forward of the knee. And so they accidentally clashed heads. Now, there was some controversy. Did this distract Cole Miller? Obviously, he was bleeding. He was damaged. But I think that also goes to show that mental toughness that, you can be busted open, but you got to get over that and continue to fight the guy. You can't keep looking at the referee for him to save you. Keep worrying about that damage above your eye. Obviously, if it is affecting your vision, then yes. But I believe what happened is that clash of heads actually took Cole Miller completely out of this fight. And then, of course, very fun at the end, Max Holloway doing some Mortal Kombat stuff, some spinning heel kicks, and, all sorts of stuff to kind of put a personal stamp on the fight. So hats off to him. And then immediately after that, it was announced that he'll be getting Cub Swanson. So you want to talk about a stepping stone and moving up in competition. Alan, what did you think of that performance?
Yeah, Max Holloway, he's an up and comer, man. He's got real good striking. I thought I would see more striking out of him. I think the length of Cole Miller kind of threw him off. But you could tell he's got good striking. I remember when I first saw Max Holloway, it might have been his UFC debut. He fought Dustin Poirier, who's another really aggressive, strong striker. And Dustin traded with him for about a minute and a half and then said, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm going to shoot in on him. And then obviously Max Holloway went the distance with Conor McGregor as well. So he's got that potential. He's a dangerous striker. He didn't show me as much in the striking department in this fight as I thought I was going to see, but I think it's because of the length of Cole Miller. Being 6'1", in that division, it threw him off. He's so used to being the taller fighter. And to go back to the headbutts, I agree, man. I think that Max was probably just the head on the fight anyway, but that that headbutt really took Cole Miller out of the fight. And then the second one, I didn't find to be really even a headbutt at all, as much as, you know, if I have somebody against the cage as well, I'm going to put my forehead in your face the same way, you know, and it's not cheating. You know, his forehead was touching him. It wasn't really a clash of heads the second time, I didn't find. It was just forehead to forehead. But the cut took Cole Miller mentally out of the fight. I will say it was a nasty-looking cut, but you have to go on, man. I mean, he doesn't know what it looks like. A cut's a cut. Yeah, I can't tell how big it is. I don't have a mirror in front of me in the cage. So, you know, as nasty as it was, all he knew that there was blood dripping in his face, and he needed to continue fighting, but he kept complaining to the refs, and it mentally threw him off.
Okay, Leslie, were you able to catch this one?
I did see this fight. I agree with everything you guys are saying about the headbutts and about it taking you out of. I don't know how he felt it in the first place. I don't feel a single thing when I'm fighting. I don't know if I'm bleeding. I don't know if I got hit. I have no clue, and I don't care while I'm fighting. So it was kind of crazy for me to watch that and to see him instantly talking about it. And, you know, it was an accidental headbutt, and he still got time to recover from it. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah, wait, I wanted to ask you guys on that, because I was confused. Do you normally get the 5 minutes on an accidental headbutt?
No.
Yeah, I believe so, because it was an incident. Yeah, well, because it's like a low blow. It's an incidental foul, right? So a foul, incidental or not, I think you normally get that time, correct?
I don't think I've ever seen it.
I have never seen it. That's what I was going to ask you, Mark. Have you ever seen that before? Because I was actually like off the couch screaming, what in the hell?
You know what?
I don't want to say I know the rules or anything specifically, but out of all the fights, which is quite a few that I've watched in my lifetime, I've never seen somebody get a break for the headbutt.
You know what? You guys could be right, because now when I remember looking back, didn't the referee think it was an eye poke first, or was that a different fight?
Exactly.
Yep.
Nope, you're exactly right. He thought it was an eye poke, so he gave him time right off the bat, and then when he realized that it was the headbutt that he was complaining about, he'd already started off with giving him time, and it was an awkward situation for the ref, I think.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, once too late to turn back at that point. I think he already gave him the time, so he just let him finish it. Yeah, you're right.
Right, he was given time, and they actually cleaned him up and everything. And if you look at most combat sports, if it's deemed an incidental clash of heads, tough shit. Keep fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Okay, well, congratulations to Max Holloway anyways. Mark, do you want to say anything on this before we move to Benson Henderson?
No, I think we've pretty much rounded it out. Why don't we move on to the main event, because I think this one was, interesting.
It was. Like I said, I'll never bet against Benson Henderson because he is a physical specimen. He's a special kind of fighter. Ever since WEC, whether he lost to Pettis or not, you know, those are very good fights. The controversial, if you will, decision against Donald Cerrone, where I think they just kind of agreed to really not fight each other. Brandon Thatch, however, was trying to put it on him. And in the first round, I thought, wow, you know what, he might catch up on him. But Benson was smart. He even said part of his strategy was not running away, but staying away from the larger man, wearing him out. And then in the third round, beautiful level change, takes him down with a high double leg, and then is able to work a picture-perfect rear naked choke. Brandon Thatch was forced to tap, and Benson showed that, yeah, he actually might be a force at 170. Of course, called out Rory McDonald right away, and Dana White stomped that immediately. But, Leslie, what do you think about Benson moving up to 170?
I think that is an answer to the PED solution. I think that is something that the UFC should be broadcasting, that they should be making a huge deal about. Look at this guy, fought this man who was bigger, but he was in better shape. He was physically prepared. He had a great game plan, and that's what fighting's all about.
Good point.
Yeah, Alan, go ahead. Expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, he didn't need a size advantage, and I mean, Benson Henderson, I bet against him, man. I bet against him this fight, and I eat my words. And honestly, I remember talking to somebody about this fight, thinking that, you know what, Benson's the kind of guy that doesn't really put butts in the seats. I hate to say it, as good as he is. After this fight, I'm such a fan of him now, man. I feel like I'm always going to remember him from this fight, not any of the other fight, not being the champion. I'm going to remember him of this fight. This was kind of like, to me, in my eyes, like a coming out party. It was intriguing, the whole former champion stepping up in a weight class against a huge guy that's already in that weight class on an 11-fight win streak, and he just came out and fought so methodically, and nobody could really figure out how to beat Brandon for such a long time. He had this hype train behind him, and he just came out there and did all the right stuff. Even when Brandon was close to doing what he does best at, like throwing the hook to the follow knee or then stepping into switch stances, landing a high kick. He does that all the time. He's got such long knees. His legs are so long that when he lifts his knee up, it's 6 feet tall. So it hits the majority of fighters that he fights in the face. Vincent Henderson being like 5'9", Brandon Thatch barely had to lift his knee to hit him in the face. So he was always throwing that lead knee to the step through high kick against him. And that normally would take everybody out. And Vincent just kept circling and throwing feints at just the right times to get him out of danger, kind of adding a little bit of wrestling in there just to kind of make him be aware of changing levels. But, man, he got the job done, and with the toothpick in his mouth and all. But, man, yeah, I'm such a Vincent fan now after this fight, I have to say. And of Ruckus, too, man. I thought he did a great job. 2 fights into his UFC career, and he's headlining a UFC fight night in his hometown. I thought he brought it, and this was, even though Vincent looked like he didn't even fight after, I thought this was such an exciting fight.
Absolutely, and our hats off to Brandon as well. He stepped up, he saved the card, fought a guy who at one point will probably be a Hall of Famer in my opinion. Mark, I wanted to ask you, what did you think about those sneaky body shots that Benson was landing all night on Thatch?
First off, I just want to say that, I'm a huge Ben Henderson fan. I always have been. I know a lot of people don't necessarily fall into that same camp because he fights the same way as another fighter that I happen to be a really big fan of, and I know, Aaron, you'll probably know exactly who I'm talking about.
Is he Canadian?
He just happens to be Canadian.
Does he go by initials instead of a name?
Typically, he goes by initials instead of a full name.
Has he fought Captain America?
Anyway, like I say, I'm a huge fan of Ben Henderson. I think, he goes in and you can tell any fight he goes into that this guy's trained. He looks good. He's got a game plan. He's a strategic fighter, and that's just it, and I think sometimes strategic fighters are guys who really go in with these concentrated game plans. They're not as much fun to watch as, say, like, and I don't want to say somebody like Vitor Belfort or like Robbie Lawler don't have like those same game plans, but they go into like just like every time they're going in to kill you with their fists, right? Ben goes in and he's got a different plan for every single fighter that he has because oftentimes he's, sometimes he's an undersized guy or whatever. And you know what? Like getting to the point that you had, Aaron, I think, some of that speaks directly to, some of these body shots and whatnot. And how he played up that and played into that. He played to where his strengths are and where he thought he could find weaknesses in Thatch's game.
So to go back to the body shot, sorry to interrupt, Aaron.
No.
I went back and watched the fight because I was real curious about it because Benson's a southpaw, I'm a southpaw. And Brandon Thatch, he's real tricky, man. He comes from that karate background or whatever, and he does a lot of switch stances. At first I used to think he was southpaw, but he's actually majority orthodox, but he switches every couple of seconds. It kind of throws you off. It throws off your offense if your opponent is switching all the time, and that's how he sets up his knees and kicks by switching, the knee comes. So what Benson did is every time Brandon Thatch was standing orthodox in a right-handed stance, and as soon as he would switch to southpaw stance, that's when Benson would throw that lead right hook to the body. As soon as he did it, I watched it every time, and he threw it as soon as Brandon Thatch returned to southpaw stance. Benson would hit him with the right hook to the body, and it kind of threw Brandon off because he was switching stances to set something up, but instead he was getting countered every time he would switch stances, and that kind of threw off. That was just another little subtlety that Ben threw in there to throw off Brandon Thatch's game. One of the many things that he did that night. That's why I'm a fan of Ben after that fight.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say, Alan Jouban, you are one of the most clinical breakdown analysts of MMA that I've ever listened to in my entire life. So bravo, hats off to you.
Thanks, man.
All right, so we can all agree that was an amazing fight, amazing performance by Benson. I hope he stays at 170, honestly. I really want to see what he can do when he doesn't have to cut weight, because I think his gas tank will go for miles, and I think he'll have that power to be able to hang. So why don't we go ahead and move on to next weekend's fights? We're only going to talk about a couple of fights because most of these guys are way Brazilian, and I will get all of their names wrong. So we're going to talk about Edson Barboza versus Michael Johnson. This is another one of those. I can't understand why Edson Barboza does not get more respect. Not only the Terry Edom knockout, but just, everything that he did, he was building so much steam, so much momentum, and then he lost to Donald Cerrone, and it seems like that's the only thing that people can remember is when he got dinged on the chin in one of his previous fights, and then when he lost to Donald Cerrone. But before that, I remember how excited, and I still am excited every time I see Edson. He is a ridiculously good striker. He has strong will, and I fully expect him to be able to take Michael Johnson out. Alan, do you watch Edson? Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, he's a scary striker. He's one of those guys that, I don't think a lot of people like to want to fight. You know what I mean? You know that you're going to get hit with some hard leg kicks and some hard punches. And even when he fought Donald Cerrone, as soon as the bell rang, he just tagged Donald right away, and you could see the difference in power and speed. I think that the reason that his hype train kind of slowed down is because he's kind of got that suspect chin, and also the way that he lost. When he lost to Donald kind of just dropped him with a jab and took his back and choked him. But what was his first loss? Was it Jamie Varner?
Yeah, it was definitely. It was Jamie Varner. That was in 2012. He beat him by TKO. Exactly.
So, like I said, I think it's something about a mix between the suspect chin and the way that he lost. When you get kind of just dropped and beat up real quickly in the first round, it takes a little bit of the mystique away from you. You know what I mean?
But I do also want to point out, when fans do this, I think sometimes they get that thing stuck in their head. Now let's just take a look back. 2010, this is his record. Win-win, 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 lost to Jamie Varner. Win-win-win, lost to Donald Cerrone, win-win. So we're talking about a guy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Out of his last 13, he's lost 2. So I think if you kind of go on the long run, I agree with you. I think he's a scary strike. This is one where I think we're probably just going to pay attention to Edson Barbosa and then maybe make fun of the main event a little bit. Mark, who do you got in this one, Edson Barbosa or Michael Johnson?
Well, Edson Barbosa, there's no question, absolutely. I've always been a huge fan of his, so plain and simple, that's where I'm going. I think, again, our what Alan said made a lot of sense, and I agree. And in terms of reading his record, that's a ridiculous record. Losing to two guys like that shouldn't be reflected as a blemish, in terms of how people interpret you as, your stance and positioning within a division in the UFC. He's a scary ass dude.
Which brings us to the heavyweights. Antonio Bigfoot Silva versus Frank Mir. I know that this is going to be a big fight in Brazil. I'm really not going to say a whole lot about this fight. I'm not very impressed with Antonio Silva after TRT. And Frank Mir, honestly, is one of those guys where he's accomplished so much in the sport. He's a likable guy. He's a great personality. And I think at this point, it just hurts me a little bit too much when I see him get wobbled like that JDS fight. To see his knees buckle and to see him, he's a family man. And to see him start to take this punishment late in his career, it kind of just breaks my heart. And I'm really hoping in this one, honestly, I don't care who wins. I just don't want to see anybody get hurt. I know that's kind of like a wuss cop-out, but that's where I'm going to go with this one. Alan, what do you think?
Yeah, man, I agree. Frank Mir's been in the sport so long. He's accomplished so much already. And as an active fighter, it's hard to say it, but he's kind of on his way out of the door. He's older and he's done a lot, so he could do that and probably be fine with it. But I think that as far as Bigfoot, he needs to win this fight. Frank Mir is kind of, on his way out the door, and Bigfoot, is still trying to be a force to be reckoned with, and he's fighting at home in Brazil. So Bigfoot, I think this is more of a must-win for Bigfoot than it is for Frank Mir. I wouldn't be surprised if Mir lost this fight that, maybe he says he's only got one left or he wants to retire or something.
Okay, do you have a prediction?
As for who wins, let me go. Bigfoot. I'm gonna have to go with Bigfoot, man. He's too big and powerful of a guy. It's gonna be tough for Mir to get him on the ground, to put him any kind of submission, chance with that. So I think Bigfoot's too strong. Keep it on the feet. He's gonna beat Mir up.
Okay, Mark, what is your prediction on this one?
It's tough, because I got a lot of love for Frank Mir, to be honest, and I agree with everything that Alan said about him kind of getting on in years a little bit. He's sort of in the twilight of his career, 100%. And yeah, I mean, I feel like Bigfoot should probably win this fight for all intents and purposes. Mir's getting a little bit slower and whatnot, and he's looked a little bit wobbly, as you said earlier on, Aaron. So I got to go with Bigfoot by gut, but again, it kind of crushes me to go against Frank Mir because I love watching him fight because he's 9 times out of 10 he's giving you a great fight to watch, win or lose.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So like I said, I just hope nobody gets seriously injured in that one. And I'm going to have to go with Mir on this one. I just really hope that he can use those new boxing skills that he has, get Bigfoot to the ground, and either stun him and then, get him in a heel hook or something like that and kind of go out on a high note. So we're going to drop this one so Leslie can join back in the conversation. Now, obviously, we're going to break this down again, the full card. So why don't we just kind of look at the overall card. I'm really excited about 184. And before we wrap up, I want to get everybody's opinion on Ronda Rousey versus Cat Zingano. Everybody's opinion on this one. Is Cat the person that can finally dethrone Ronda? What do you think, Leslie?
I think Rousey's going to take it. I mean, Zingano is strong physically and mentally, but in the past she's really bulldogged her opponents. She's done a lot of clinch and cage work, and that really sets up Ronda's judo. I'm interested in seeing their grappling, but I wouldn't be surprised if it turns into a stand-up battle because Ronda's boxing keeps getting better, and the more she stands, the more she silences the critics that called her a one-trick pony. And I think Zingano's best chance could be to land some hard strikes and to do some damage with her knees and elbows if they end up on the inside. So but I still have to give it to Rousey. I'm giving it to Rousey.
Okay,
I think it'll be an exciting fight.
All right.
But I think Rousey's going to take it.
All right. Alan?
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with that. Cat is kind of part of the Black House family, which I am now too, so it's hard to, to say anything against her. But Rousey's just proven to be kind of just, taking every fight that she goes against. The UFC has to do its job and build it as this is the next person to dethrone her. But she's just proven time and time again that she kind of stands alone at this moment. So Zingano's a tough girl. The thing is, Zingano kind of, she gets, she kind of like me. She gets rocked sometimes and she comes back. She gets in like dog fights and stuff like that. And it's just like, is Rousey the kind of girl that you want to do that with? Do you want to end up on the ground in a dogfight with Rousey, where all you need is some, minute opening and she's going to take your arm? So, it wouldn't be beneficial to end up in a bunch of crazy scrambles on the ground with Ronda. But if she keeps it on the feet and we see, they said banging on the feet, that would be super interesting. Either way, I know it's going to be a super exciting fight because Rousey always has people on the edge of the feet, and I know Kat's going to bring it, so I look forward to this one. But if I had to put money on it, man, I couldn't bet against Ronda on this one.
All right, Mark?
Aaron, I bet against Ronda in almost every single fight she's had in the UFC and prior to in Strikeforce, just because, again, I always saw her as being one-trick pony. I said, how can, her opponents not really be training for this thing that she does and beats everybody doing, RE, the armbar. But, man, she's proven she can do it over and over and over again. She gets people down to the mat. She's got those crazy throws. I can't bet against Rousey in this one. I mean, I think I'd be a damn fool to be otherwise. History's told me that if I bet against Rousey, I'm a damn fool. So.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that Kat is her biggest threat, absolutely. But I think Ronda brings that aggressiveness, that will to win, that Olympian will to win, where she will find a way. I do think that I agree with Alan. This is going to be probably one of the most exciting WMMA fights to go down perhaps ever. But like you said, if I had to bet $5 on it, I'm definitely going to go with Ronda too. We could be pleasantly surprised, or maybe not pleasantly surprised, and Kat could pull this out. But I think when you have somebody as dominant as Ronda, it's it's definitely hard to bet against her. So I think that's where we're going to wrap up our predictions. Alan, before I put a pin in the show, is there you want to take some time to do some shout outs and rep your gym and management company and sponsors and stuff like that before we let you go?
Yeah, I don't really know my sponsors just yet, and I have a bunch of them who have been great. But as far as my gyms, Black House, MMA, Saxons, Muay Thai, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, and of course my management, Epoch agency, they've been helping me get to where I am now. You know, it looked like I have a lot further way to go. So thank you, all you guys.
Okay, and then for that one stinky guy at the gym, Alan will be bringing you some dude wipes on Monday.
Yeah. And some new cologne.
Yeah, definitely some new fancy cologne. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for coming on as a co-host. Hopefully we can do this on a semi-regular basis. You bring a lot of class to the show. Alan, thank you so much for taking some time and bearing with us through some technical difficulties. So unless anyone has anything else to say, I think I'm going to say goodnight.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Absolutely no problem. Okay, fight fans, you've been listening to Stand and Bang. You can find us on LUB-MMA.com. And remember, check out Jamie Skipper over at Unique Kennels /Conway. He has been breeding quality English Bulldogs for 30 years. Tiago Alves has one of his dogs. Last night on the fights, you saw Benson Henderson and Efrain Escudero repping him. He is a very reputable sponsor of UFC and Bellator fighters, been in it a long time. Go over to Twitter and check out at Unique Kennels 71. Go ahead and say hi to the guys. Give them a follow. And check out the quality kennel that they are and keep an eye on it. He told me that there's going to be some big news coming up that will be very interesting to the industry. So I want to thank everybody for listening and have a good night.